For a closer look at foreign policy with Asia under a second Trump administration, Dr. Michael Green, professor and CEO at the United States Studies Center, joins us live. Dr. Green, a lot was said in his inauguration speech, but a lot wasn't either. Not much of a mention about Asia. What are you reading to what wasn't said and how that could shape a U.S.'s policy towards Asia over the next 4 years?
Well, this inauguration looks unprecedented, but I have to say it's a bit of history repeating itself. 200 years ago, when Andrew Jackson became president, he kicked out the East Coast establishment that had dominated politics. In his inauguration, he invited all these backwoodsmen, farmers and hunters from the Kentucky, Ohio frontiers into the White House. They got drunk. They ate a giant wheel of cheese. There is a bit of a cyclical dimension to this, that American politics sort of recharges itself around populism, but not that much always changes, frankly. The American people elected Donald Trump and gave the Republicans a very, very narrow majority in the Congress, basically to fix inflation and do something about immigration. And that's what Trump will be judged on. That will determine whether he maintains control of the Congress in 2 years. So he's got a somewhat more limited mandate than you'd think from this. On Asia, so far, the people he's appointed on Asia have been very good. Ivan Kapanathi is taking the role I had in the Bush administration as the head of Asia in the White House at the NSC. The Deputy National Security Advisor, Alex Wong, is an old Asia hand. Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, has a history traveling to Japan and studying alliances. And Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. So on Asia, alliances, security policy, a lot of continuity, actually, but there will be a harder line on China for sure. And then the tariffs are the big question. And he'll start with China, Mexico, and Canada, and we'll see where it goes from there.
I know Liz wants to talk to you about tariffs in a moment, but I want to just get back on China. What do you make of Mr. Trump's jibe at China running the Panama Canal with the Chinese VP Han Sung in plain earshot? It shows he's not shying away from direct confrontation from what I see, but what do you make of the restart of relations between China and the U.S., and what will Trump's priorities likely be towards China?
Well, Donald Trump has always been of two minds about American adversaries, whether it's Xi Jinping in China or Kim Jong-un in North Korea or Putin. On the one hand, he talks extremely tough, surrounds himself with real hawks. On the other hand, he's a showman and he loves making a deal. So at some level, I'm sure Donald Trump is tempted to see if he can use all this bluster to get an economic deal with China. I'm doubtful it will work because I don't think the Chinese trust him. And also the political mood in the country and among his own administration is pretty tough on China. There's not a lot of trust for Beijing. So it will be a tougher tone on China, but not that different from where the Biden administration was, which picked up a lot of the toughness from the first Trump administration. The allies will have a vote. The U.S. doesn't have enough military, economic, or diplomatic power to do this alone. So close allies like Japan and Australia in particular will have a lot of say about where China policy goes. But coming out of the dock, he's setting a very tough tone, that's for sure.
All right, what about using Taiwan as a bargaining chip and his backing of the one China policy? How conditional will American support be for Taiwan, if at all, under President Donald Trump?
Well, we saw in the first term, and we'll see again, that President Trump is a man with a pretty brilliant sense of how to seize the moment and dominate the headlines. But there's no core grand strategy or set of principles that guides it. So at some level, his former cabinet members have said publicly he would trade Taiwan. He's not committed in the way that most U.S. presidents have been. On the other hand, the bipartisan support for Taiwan in the U.S. Congress has not been this high in many, many decades. And all the key people that Trump has appointed to pretty much every position so far is very solid on Taiwan. So it'll be a bit mixed, but on the whole, I think Trump's personal proclivities to cut deals and sell out friends and allies won't have a lot of room because institutionally, politically, structurally, Washington, the American public, the Congress, and U.S. allies see what's at stake in the Taiwan Strait.
Oh, Dr. Green, President Trump also stopped short of announcing new tariffs immediately. How are you interpreting this, especially ahead of taking office? You know, he said those were among his day one objectives, targeting China, Canada, Mexico. Really, what do you make of this sort of delay in announcing new tariffs, which he has talked up so much? Was it him just grandstanding, or are there perhaps divisions in his administration on how to carry it out?
It's not really clear what he studied at the Wharton School of Economics because he believes that bilateral trade deficits matter, and the most basic economics says it doesn't. There are many, many factors that go into trade deficits, but his view has been for 5 decades almost that America is getting cheated and we have to eliminate trade deficits. The traditional American support for TPP, for trade, the stuff I worked on in previous administrations, has evaporated in large part because integrating China has proven counterproductive for most American workers. And so it's a wide open debate now about where American trade policy goes. But one thing is pretty clear. While Donald Trump loves tariffs, and his key economic cabinet members say they will support them, there's also a recognition by his advisors that tariffs cause inflation. And Trump won because Americans are tired of inflation. So there's clearly under the surface a lot of division among his advisors. And I think that explains why there wasn't an actual detailed tariff plan on day one as promised. I think China will definitely be in the crosshairs. Canada and Mexico will come under pressure that they hope will lead to concessions. But personally, I don't see universal tariffs or the External Revenue Service and going back to the 1800s where tariffs were used to fund the budget. I just don't see that. The inflationary impact will immediately bite the Trump administration politically. So there's a lot of sound and fury. China's in the crosshairs, but the rest of it we'll just have to see.
Right. And Donald Trump also loves bilateral deals. He much prefers them over multilateralism. He's made it very clear. How is that likely to change the dynamics in Asia? What does it mean for small nations like Singapore? We need these multilateral trade pacts.
Well, look, Singapore is a very close friend of the U.S. Our security and intelligence relationships, our economic relationship is very, very tight. But Singapore does cling to the Bretton Woods system, the open trading system that is losing support, not only in the US, but in Europe and other countries as well. So I think for Singapore and other close US friends, the art of dealing with Trump is not to proselytize and proclaim the glory of the international liberal order and TPP, but to be creative about targeted economic agreements around tech, maybe around AI, around digital trade and things like that. And frankly, they are going to be an easier sell in Washington if China's not in it, which is tough for Singapore, but that's where the mood is in the US and frankly also in Japan and a lot of other countries. Tariffs, look, as I said, Trump will pay a political price if he really goes full bore on tariffs because they are very inflationary. And polls show in the US that the public doesn't want that. So there will be a lot of bluster, and I think Singapore officials will have to keep a calm head, don't lecture Trump, and be a bit more creative about economic statecraft and agreements around tech in areas that can yield results in the near term, while the US system and the world figures out what trade agreements look like going forward.
All right, Dr. Green, appreciate your time. We were speaking with Dr. Michael Green, professor and CEO at the United States Studies Center. He's previously also served on the staff of the National Security Council at the White House from 2001 through 2005.